August 12, 1944, Normandy, France, just after dawn. The hedgerows are still wet with morning mist, clinging to wool uniforms and steel helmets. Somewhere beyond the low rise, an engine coughs, not German, American. Louder, confident, closer. Colonel Friedrich Adler of the Wehrmacht stands beside a shattered Kubelwagen, his greatcoat streaked with mud and chalk dust. His field glasses hang uselessly against his chest. For the first time in 6 years of war, he is not issuing orders. He is waiting. You can almost feel the weight in his chest, not fear exactly, but something colder, final. A white cloth flutters from a rifle barrel held by a trembling lieutenant nearby. The sound of engines grows into a roar. Sherman tanks crest the hedgerow, olive-drab hulls smeared with dust, infantry riding the decks like passengers on a city tram. Their radios crackle. Their turrets turn smoothly, deliberately, without panic. This is not a breakthrough force, scraping together its last fuel. This is an army that knows it will be resupplied. Adler lowers his hand slowly as an American sergeant approaches, Thompson slung casually, eyes alert but unhurried. No shouting, no confusion, just procedure. "Colonel," the sergeant asks, glancing at the silver eagles. Adler nods once. That nod ends his war. They disarm him with efficiency that borders on boredom. Sidearm, map case, field notebook, nothing dramatic, no trophies taken. The Americans have no time for that. There are schedules to keep. As he's guided toward the rear, Adler notices something that unsettles him more than defeat. There is no sense of urgency. The Americans move like men who know exactly what comes next. Trucks roll forward as infantry pushes past. Engineers are already clearing lanes through the hedgerow. A jeep stops, delivers orders, moves on. Another takes its place. It feels rehearsed, industrial. Adler had studied American doctrine. He had read the intelligence briefings back in Paris. Material rich, tactically naive. That was the consensus. Standing here, watching the seamless choreography of vehicles and men, he begins to suspect something is wrong with that assumption. Very wrong. He is processed quickly, too quickly. Within hours, Adler finds himself seated in the back of a GMC CCKW deuce and a half, canvas flapping overhead as the truck rolls west. The road is jammed not with refugees, not with retreating troops, but with supplies. Endless supplies. Fuel tankers nose to tail, flatbeds stacked with ammunition crates, recovery vehicles hauling damaged Shermans forward even as replacements roll past them in the opposite direction. The traffic never stops, it merely flows. Adler watches in silence. In 1941, he had marched into Russia with 3 days of fuel and 5 days of rations. Every kilometer had been calculated, every delay catastrophic. He remembers the maps with red grease-pencil arrows that meant nothing once the trucks broke down and the horses collapsed. Here, the Americans don't seem to count kilometers. They count time. The truck stops near what Adler expects to be a temporary holding area. Instead, he steps into something closer to a small city. A motor pool stretches beyond the tree line, acres of vehicles parked in disciplined rows, trucks, half-tracks, bulldozers, tank transporters, mobile kitchens, fuel bowsers, wreckers, cranes, each labeled, each logged, each ready. Engines idle. Mechanics move between vehicles with clipboards and grease-stained hands. Replacement engines sit on pallets under tarps, tagged and numbered like inventory in a warehouse. Adler slows without meaning to. No one urges him forward. An American officer notices his stare. A captain, perhaps logistics branch. He follows Adler's gaze, then smiles faintly, not with pride but familiarity. "Just one of the pools," he says casually. "We've got another 5 within 30 miles. 5. Adler feels something shift behind his ribs. They walk him through the depot. fuel drums stacked higher than a house, spare tracks laid out like railroad ties, crates of transmissions, radios still in cosmoline, tires by the thousands. A rail spur feeds directly into the compound, boxcars unloading without pause. This is not a captured stockpile. This is routine. Adler asks a question before he can stop himself. How long to assemble this? The captain looks puzzled. Assemble. He gestures around them. This depot. The captain thinks for a moment. Oh, it's been here maybe 10 days, 2 weeks. 10 days. Adler does the math instinctively. The rail capacity, the port throughput, the trucking schedules required to sustain this volume. His mind, trained in staff colleges and supply tables, begins to fracture under the scale. Germany could not build this in a year. What strikes him most is not the size. It is the redundancy. Every critical vehicle has a twin. Every fuel line has a bypass. If one convoy is lost, another follows. If a bridge is destroyed, engineers already have pontoons staged nearby. There is no single point of failure. For years, Adler had believed wars were decided by bold maneuvers and decisive battles. Encirclements, breakthroughs, the destruction of enemy formations. Standing here, surrounded by quiet abundance, he realizes the truth with terrifying clarity. Battles are interruptions. Logistics is the war. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the parked trucks, Adler stops walking. The captain notices. You all right, Colonel? Adler looks out over the motor pool one last time. The engines, the fuel, the spare parts waiting patiently for machines not yet broken. He speaks softly, almost to himself. We can win battles, he says. We cannot defeat this. The captain doesn't reply. He doesn't need to. Because Adler already knows with absolute certainty that Germany has lost something far more important than territory. The road curves away from the motor pool, but the image refuses to leave Adler's mind. Row after row, engine after engine, fuel enough to burn for weeks without a pause. The truck carrying him rattles onward, deeper into the American rear. No guards shout. No one rushes. The war back here feels eerily calm, like the eye of a storm that has already decided the outcome. Adler sits upright, hands folded, replaying what he has seen. His training tells him to catalog it, to quantify, to find weaknesses. But there are none he can grasp. They arrive at a temporary POW transit camp just before nightfall. Barbed wire rings the perimeter, but it feels almost symbolic. Floodlights hum softly. Tents are aligned with mathematical precision. A field kitchen is already serving hot food. Adler notices something immediately. No shortages. The guards are fed the same rations as the prisoners. Coffee flows freely. Bread is fresh. Even cigarettes are handed out without ceremony. This is not generosity. This is surplus. As Adler eats, he listens. Other captured officers speak in low voices, majors, captains, staff men like himself. They trade rumors the way soldiers always do. Some talk about air power, others about tanks. Adler says nothing. He is no longer thinking tactically. He is thinking industrially. That night, sleep does not come easily. Every time Adler closes his eyes, he sees the motor pool again, not as a spectacle but as a system. Inputs and outputs, flow rates, replacement cycles. He remembers Russia. Winter 1941. Engines frozen solid, fuel gelled, spare parts cannibalized from dead vehicles, entire divisions halted not by enemy fire but by empty fuel gauges. He remembers Italy. Trucks stranded on mountain roads because rail lines were bombed and replacements never came. Men fighting bravely, brilliantly, with nothing behind them. In every campaign, logistics had been a constraint. For the Americans, it appears to be a weapon. The following morning, Adler is summoned for questioning. The interrogation room is unremarkable. A folding table, 2 chairs, a wall map of France dotted with colored pins. The officer across from him is a lieutenant colonel intelligence, judging by the insignia. They exchange formalities: rank, unit, date of capture. Routine. Then the American leans back slightly. You saw one of our depots yesterday. It's not a question. Adler nods. What did you think? The room is quiet, no trick here, no raised voice. The American genuinely wants to know. Adler considers lying, or deflecting, or offering a harmless generality. Instead, he answers honestly. It was not a depot, he says. It was an argument. The American raises an eyebrow. An argument. For victory, Adler replies, and it was already won. The lieutenant colonel doesn't interrupt. Adler continues, momentum building now that the words have started. You replace what you lose before it matters. A destroyed tank is an inconvenience. A lost convoy is a rounding error. Your army advances knowing that tomorrow will look exactly like today, only closer to Berlin. He pauses, then adds something that surprises even himself. In Germany, we fight knowing that every loss is permanent. The American officer studies him for a long moment. There is no triumph in his expression, only confirmation. You're not the first to say something like that, he says quietly. That sentence lands harder than any insult. Not the first. After the interview, Adler is escorted outside. A column of trucks passes the camp, engines droning in perfect rhythm. Each vehicle carries markings identifying unit, cargo type, destination. Nothing improvised, nothing wasted. Adler watches a mechanic hop down from a moving truck, grab a clipboard, exchange a few words with another crew, then jump onto a different vehicle, all without stopping the flow. This is not bravery. This is organization at scale. Adler realizes something then, something deeply unsettling. German intelligence had seen fragments of this, reports of American production numbers, rumors of assembly lines, intercepted shipping manifests. But none of it had been believed, because belief would have required admitting that courage, discipline, and experience were no longer enough. Days pass. Adler is moved again deeper into Allied territory. Along the way, he sees more depots, more railheads, more repair yards. Each one mirrors the last. Standardized layouts, identical procedures, familiar equipment. This, he understands, is the true American doctrine. Not Patton's aggression, not Eisenhower's coordination. Repeatability. Anything that works is copied. Anything that fails is replaced. Lessons are absorbed instantly and distributed across the entire force. Germany, by contrast, perfects. America multiplies. One afternoon, Adler is allowed to speak with another captured officer, a panzer major from Caen. The man is shaken, still clinging to battlefield explanations. If we had more Tigers, the major insists, if the fuel trains had arrived. Adler interrupts him gently. You could have twice as many Tigers, he says. They would still outlast you. The major frowns. How can you be so sure? Adler gestures toward the distant rumble of engines, always present day and night. Because they are not fighting us with tanks, he says. They are fighting us with replacement. That evening, Adler is handed back his field notebook, now cleared by intelligence. He opens it for the first time since capture. The pages are filled with neat handwriting, orders, timetables, supply requests that were never fulfilled. On the final blank page, he writes a single line. This war was decided long before the first shot was fired. He closes the book slowly. Outside, another convoy passes. another 1,000 tons closer to Germany. And Adler knows with absolute certainty that somewhere ahead, German soldiers are preparing brilliant defenses against an enemy that cannot be exhausted. They are preparing to win battles. The Americans are preparing to end the war. The transfer happens without ceremony. One morning, Adler is told to pack his few belongings. By afternoon, he is riding east again, not toward Germany, but toward something far more unsettling. Understanding. The truck moves past another railhead, and Adler watches flat cars unload in practiced silence. Tanks roll down ramps under their own power. Trucks are refueled before their engines even cool. Schedules are posted on boards like factory shifts. No speeches, no banners. Just output. Adler realizes then that what he is witnessing is not wartime improvisation. It is peacetime industry redirected. At the next holding facility, Adler is placed among senior prisoners, men who once sat in staff rooms, who argued doctrine and drew arrows across maps. Conversations here are different, quieter, more analytical. One evening, as rain taps softly against the canvas roofs, a former quartermaster general speaks up. "We always assumed their production figures were exaggerated," the man says. "Propaganda." Another officer nods. "Even if true, we believe transport would limit them." Adler listens, then finally speaks. "I saw the transport," he says. "The transport is the weapon." The group falls silent. He explains the motor pool, the redundancy, the rhythm. He explains something else, too, something harder to admit. "They do not fear loss," Adler says, "because loss does not slow them." That sentence changes the room. A general rubs his temples. Then how do you fight such an enemy? Adler doesn't answer right away. "You don't," he says finally. "You negotiate or you collapse." No one argues. Weeks later, Adler is permitted to observe, from a distance, a replacement battalion arriving from the United States. The men are clean, their boots new, their equipment standardized down to the last buckle. Each soldier carries gear packed according to the same checklist. They are not veterans. And yet Adler realizes they don't need to be. They are components in a system that absorbs individual weakness and amplifies collective strength. Losses will be filled. Experience will be transferred. The machine will continue. Germany's system, by contrast, burns its best men first. Adler begins reconstructing the war in his mind, not as it was fought, but as it was supplied. Poland, France, Barbarossa, Africa. Every German success depended on speed, on shock, on enemies who collapsed before supply lines stretched thin. America does not collapse. It expands. Even defeat feeds the system, every broken vehicle studied, every mistake logged, every fix standardized. The realization is suffocating. One afternoon, an American officer asks Adler a question that feels almost cruel in its simplicity. "When do you think your side lost?" Adler considers the easy answers: Stalingrad, El Alamein, Normandy. He shakes his head. "Before the war," he says. The officer waits. "When you chose brilliance over capacity," Adler continues. "When we built machines that could not be replaced and trained men who could not be spared." He gestures toward the distant hum of engines. "You chose to fight the last war better. They chose to fight the next war first." That night Adler cannot sleep. He lies awake, listening to the constant drone of trucks on distant roads. They never stop, not at midnight, not at dawn. A thought comes unbidden, terrifying in its clarity. Even if Germany could somehow stop the Allies tomorrow, the factories would keep producing. The depots would keep filling. The war would resume. Victory would only be delayed. Defeat is inevitable. The final blow comes quietly. A fellow prisoner shares news smuggled in from a guard. Allied forces have broken out of Normandy. Paris is threatened. Supply lines are expanding, not straining. Adler closes his eyes. The motor pool flashes again in his mind, not as memory, but as prophecy. He understands now why the Americans did not rush him, why they showed him what they did. They didn't need secrecy. Their strength could not be hidden, and it did not need to be. Adler opens his notebook one last time. Beneath his earlier line, he adds another. Battles are moments, industry is destiny. He snaps the book shut. Outside, engines roar closer now. Closer to home. Closer to Berlin. By the time Adler reaches the permanent POW camp, the war has changed shape. Not at the front there. Men still die in hedgerows and ruined towns, but in the rear, where the outcome is no longer debated. It is scheduled. The camp sits near a rail junction in northern France. From inside the wire, Adler can see the trains arrive every day at the same hour. Boxcars open. Cargo flows out. Empty cars roll away. No drama, no celebration. Just continuity. Adler understands now that the Americans are not reacting to events. They are executing a plan. Inside the camp, the mood has shifted. Earlier optimism among German officers has drained away, replaced by something heavier, a professional despair. These are not defeated men clinging to ideology. These are planners who finally see the full map. One evening, Adler sits with a former Luftwaffe logistics officer, a man who once managed fuel allocations for entire air fleets. "I used to argue for more reserves," the officer says quietly. "They told me it was impossible, that the economy couldn't sustain it." Adler nods. "That argument only works if your economy is small," he replies. They sit in silence, listening to distant engines again. Always the engines. Days later, an American major gives a briefing to the prisoners. Not propaganda, not threats, just information. He speaks of throughput, of tonnage landed per day, of repaired ports and temporary harbors, of standardized parts and interchangeable crews. Adler watches the faces around him as numbers are spoken aloud. Men who once commanded divisions now struggle to comprehend the scale. This is not arrogance from the Americans. It is transparency. They are not afraid to be understood. Adler realizes something unsettling. The Allies are no longer worried about German reaction. They are planning beyond resistance. You don't calculate this far ahead unless opposition is already accounted for. That night, Adler dreams of maps. Not battle maps, supply maps. Lines thicken, arrows multiply. German lines fade, thinning until they break altogether. The American lines do not move quickly, but they never stop. When Adler wakes, his certainty is complete. The war continues only because momentum takes time to die. Weeks pass. News filters in through guards and newspapers left lying around deliberately. Allied landings in the south. More ports captured. Production numbers from America that seem almost obscene. Adler stops sharing these reports with other prisoners. He doesn't want to watch the moment it clicks for them. Because when it does, something inside breaks. One afternoon, Adler is called to speak with an American colonel, logistics again. The colonel is polite, curious. "You've been watching our operations," he says. "What do you think we did right?" Adler exhales slowly. "You made war boring," he says. The colonel smiles faintly. "That bad?" "For us," Adler replies, "yes." He leans forward slightly. "A war that depends on heroism can be disrupted. A war that depends on supply cannot." As Adler returns to his barracks, he sees a new group of American soldiers arriving nearby. Fresh units, new equipment, same procedures. He understands now why American casualties, while heavy, do not paralyze the system. The system does not mourn. It replaces. This is not cruelty. It is design. Adler begins to think beyond 1944. Beyond Germany. Beyond defeat. He thinks of future wars. Of nations that will still believe victory comes from superior weapons or brilliant commanders. Of generals who will chase decisive battles while ignoring factories, ports, railways. They will repeat Germany's mistake. They will lose before they understand why. That evening, Adler writes his final entry. The Americans did not outfight us. They outlasted us before the first shot. He sets the pencil down. Outside, the rumble grows louder, closer now, unmistakable. The front is moving again. Not because of genius. Because of inevitability, the first snow comes early. It dusts the camp lightly, settling on barbed wire and rooftops, muting sound the way snow always does. The engines are still there, they never disappear, but now they sound farther away, more distant, like thunder rolling across a finished storm. Adler stands at the fence, hands wrapped around the cold wire, watching another train arrive. He no longer counts the cars. He already knows the answer. By late autumn, the illusion of reversal has vanished completely. No one in the camp speaks of counteroffensives anymore. No one talks about wonder weapons. Even the most loyal officers have gone quiet, their arguments exhausted by arithmetic. One morning, a guard leaves a newspaper on a bench. Adler does not rush to read it. He already understands what it will say. More advances, more ports, more production. The war is not ending suddenly. It is closing, like a ledger being balanced line by line. That afternoon, Adler is summoned again, not for interrogation but for conversation. The same American lieutenant colonel sits across from him, coffee steaming gently between them. Outside the window, trucks roll past in perfect intervals. "You were a staff officer," the American says. "You planned campaigns." "Yes." "If you could speak to your younger self, what would you tell him?" Adler doesn't answer immediately. He thinks of maps in Berlin, of arguments over tank armor thickness, of debates about tactical superiority. He thinks of factories running one shift instead of three. "I would tell him," Adler says slowly, "that the enemy is not the man shooting at you." The American waits. "It is the man who replaces him," Adler finishes. The lieutenant colonel nods. "That lesson took us a while too," he says. "We just learned it earlier." That's the cruelest part, Adler realizes. The Americans did not invent some magical solution mid-war. They prepared for a kind of conflict Germany never fully accepted. A war without pauses. Winter deepens. News comes in fragments now, but each piece confirms the same truth. German formations fighting well, retreating slowly, bleeding steadily. Equipment shortages worsening. Fuel almost gone. The war has become what Adler always feared. A defensive accounting exercise. One the Reich cannot win. One night an argument breaks out in the barracks. A younger officer insists Germany can still force negotiations, that the Allies will tire, that casualties will change minds. Adler listens, then speaks for the first time in weeks. "They will not tire," he says. The room goes quiet. "Because they do not experience war as depletion," Adler continues. "They experience it as throughput." He gestures vaguely westward. "They do not feel losses the way we do. Loss is absorbed, converted, replaced." No one challenges him. A few days later, the sound changes. The rumble grows closer, louder, constant. Artillery now. The front is approaching faster than expected. Adler stands again at the fence as a massive convoy passes, this one marked for forward movement. Tanks, fuel, bridging equipment, mobile hospitals. Everything needed to finish a war. An American sergeant notices him watching. Almost done, the sergeant says casually, more to himself than to Adler. Adler nods. Yes, he replies, it has been done for a long time. That night, Adler opens his notebook for the last time. There are no more notes to write, no insights left unspoken. Only one final certainty remains. He writes carefully, deliberately. The war did not end when we were defeated. It ended when we were outproduced. He closes the notebook and hands it to a guard the next morning. I won't need this anymore, he says. As Adler is led back toward the barracks, the sky to the east glows faintly, not from sunrise, but from distant fire. The war is moving on without him now. Without argument. Without doubt. Only one question remains unanswered, not for Adler, but for the world that will follow. Will anyone remember that this is how wars are truly won? Or will they have to learn it again? Spring arrives quietly. No announcement, no ceremony. One morning, Adler realizes the air no longer smells like winter fuel and damp canvas. The ground is soft again. The trains still arrive, but now they pass through without stopping, pushing east, chasing an ending already written. The war is almost over. In the camp, the guard's posture has changed. Not relaxed, professional, but forward-looking. Paperwork increases. Lists are checked and rechecked. Trucks arrive not with ammunition, but with forms, crates, and temporary signage. Occupation logistics. Adler recognizes the pattern immediately. This is not victory celebration. This is transition. On a warm afternoon, Adler is allowed to walk along the fence line with the American lieutenant colonel one last time. The man gestures toward the road where convoys still pass. You know, he says, most people think this war was won by generals. Adler watches a column of trucks disappear over the horizon. They were wrong, he replies. The American smiles. I think so too. Adler reflects on the irony. The Germans perfected operational art, blitzkrieg, combined arms, rapid decision-making. The Americans perfected something quieter. Continuity. No pauses between victories, no collapse after setbacks, no reliance on genius. Just systems that endured. News arrives soon after. Berlin has fallen. There is no cheering in the camp. Only exhalation. Adler feels neither relief nor anger. Only confirmation. Weeks later, Adler is transported again, this time toward repatriation. The trucks feel the same, the procedures identical, the system unchanged even as the war ends. That, Adler realizes, is the final lesson. The Americans did not build a war machine. They built a national machine that could fight wars. And when this one ended, it did not break. It simply shifted purpose. As the convoy passes through ruined German towns, Adler sees the contrast with painful clarity. Collapsed factories, empty rail yards, idle machines waiting for fuel that will never come. Germany did not lose because its soldiers were weaker. It lost because its systems were fragile. At a temporary processing center, Adler is asked to give a statement. Why, they want to know, did he believe defeat was inevitable so early? He answers without hesitation. Because I saw abundance treated as normal, he says, and scarcity treated as unacceptable. That night, Adler lies awake one final time. The engines are still there, but now they sound different. They are rebuilding. He imagines future officers, future planners, future wars. Some will remember this lesson. Many will not. The camera pulls back. Not from Adler, but from the road. Convoys stretch beyond the horizon, carrying not weapons now, but food, tools, and machinery. The same system, the same rhythm, the same inevitability. The war is over. The lesson remains.